Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, we're going to be talking about under-the-radar free agents for every CFL team, one for every team, and we're going to just be doing one of those kind of videos today. But really quickly before we get started, I actually have an announcement to make. I am going to be doing a live stream February 8th. I think it's a Tuesday, unfortunately, for day one of free agency. I haven't decided whether I'm going to be going live right at 12 noon when the actual date where players can sign, or I'm going to do a stream later on in the day so more people can watch. I'll keep you guys posted about that. Still undecided about that, but I will be going live that day, so hope some of you can join me for that. I'd really appreciate it. You guys can ask questions about the channel, and it'll be my first live stream ever, so looking forward to that. So with that in mind, let's get into today's video talking about the under-the-radar free agents for every CFL team, and we're just going to start and jump right into it here. For Calgary, I have linebacker slash defensive back JAMAR Wall, and Wall's been with the Stampeders a long time. I think he's been there so long that he kind of a little underrated a little bit, and his value that he's brought to the Calgary Stampeders defenses over the years, because, you know, the guys like Alex Singleton, Jagarrett Davis, those kind of guys that were part of those teams a few years ago, I think they got a lot of the credit. But JAMAR Wall is still here, still such an important piece for this team, and when he got healthy down the stretch last year, he was a big difference for this team. So for Calgary, I think bringing him back is a pretty important priority in my opinion. Maybe not the highest priority, but I think he's a guy that really should be back for them because of his versatility. He can play safety, he can play strong side linebacker, could just move around and play a lot of different spots for them. So I think it would be important for Calgary to retain him. For the Montreal Alouettes, and I didn't mention this before, but I'm not going in any kind of order. This is just all completely randomized. I'll put a timestamp list down in the description when I'm releasing this video. But for Montreal Alouettes, we have Mario Alford. He's a kick returner, listed as a wide receiver, but he doesn't really do too much, hasn't shown very much on the offensive side, really hasn't got the opportunity to, but he's a very good kick returner. The last couple of years that he's been there, he suffered a season-ending injury this year, so that was unfortunate. So that really hurt the Montreal Alouettes and their special teams, but bringing him back would be a big boost because he, I believe, is one of the better return men in the CFL, and I think a lot of teams are looking for that right now. So Montreal has one of those players. Try to hold on to him. I know, coming off the injury, we'll see what he is, but I think it's a pretty big priority for Montreal to bring him back. For the BC Lions, I'm going with Canadian wide receiver, Jevon Catoy. And for the Lions, I was looking over a lot of their list, and you have obvious guys like Gary Peters, just a really solid defensive back that's been there for such a long time, but he's an obvious guy to re-sign. But a lot of these guys, I think for BC, you can afford to let them walk and try to just rebuild a lot of that roster around the core guys. You got Lucky Whitehead already re-signed. If you are still trusting Mike Riley at quarterback, you have him. And then Yusuk Chung, a national offensive lineman they brought back. So I went with Catoy here because I think he's a guy that has a lot of potential, and he showed it a lot in his first couple of CFL seasons, really breaking on in a really crowded national receiver room in BC with Lamar Durant and Shaq Johnson there. But he's a very interesting body type, has that kind of tight end-ish body, and I think he can have a lot of make a lot of plays for this offense going forward if they can retain him. For the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and man, dude, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have a lot of key free agents this offseason, but I think a guy that didn't really get the recognition, in fact, he was the only player on his offensive line that didn't get an all-star appearance this season, and that is Michael Couture, the center of that unit. And I think Couture, I mean, he lost out to a great player in Sean McEwen from Calgary, but Couture is one of the better centers in the league as well. I'm very impressed by his tape over the last couple of seasons. 2019 was really impressive from him. He played all the games in the regular season, but broke his leg in that last regular season game. So I think this guy is really good. He's really good on the move in the screen game, really important part of that for Winnipeg. So I'm really think it's important for them to maintain that continuity under center. So Couture is a must resign for me for Winnipeg, and I think he's kind of under the radar. For the Ottawa Redblacks, this was a team that was really hard to come up with an underrated free agents because similar to BC, I think they're in a situation where they can let a lot of guys go and they, can reshape this roster almost entirely. But I think a guy that they should bring back and that played pretty well for them this year is DAVON Coleman, a defensive tackle. He actually was a pretty good player for BC in 2019 and then comes over here to Ottawa in 2021. And I think he put up a handful of sacks and was just a pretty disruptive piece in the middle of that defense. So I think he's kind of a building block if they want to bring back some of these veterans going forward, and I think he would be a good option for them to bring back. Now moving on to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and similar to a couple other teams, not a ton of under-the-radar kind of guys. I think a lot of the guys that they have left that are worth re-signing are, those key guys that you think of. But the guy I'm going with is defensive tackle, Canadian defensive tackle, McConaughey Henry. Quietly just a pretty solid force in the middle of that defense. Really important for ratio purposes that you bring back a very proven Canadian starter in Henry if you're Saskatchewan. Really good run defender. Not the most dynamic pass rusher in the world, but, occasionally flashes some ability in that sense. So I think he's a really important piece to the Saskatchewan Roughriders defense, that run defense that is so strong the last couple of years. So I think he's a must to bring back if you're Saskatchewan. Now moving on to the Edmonton Elks, and this team actually has a lot of guys that are candidates for a list like this. A lot of these guys had down years this year, but I think have shown good ability in the CFL previously. And the guy I'm most interested to see if they re-sign, and I think they should re-sign, is defensive end Antonio Simmons. And this is the guy they got back in exchange for Trevor Harris midway through the season. And I think he's one of the more talented guys that at defensive line in the league that hasn't broke out yet and became a full-time starting defensive end. And I think the athletic potential has always been there with Antonio Simmons. It's just, I think he needs to get that full-time opportunity. And I thought he was going to get it in Montreal last year, but I think a lot of these guys, free agent signings like Nick Usher, really overtook him in that lineup and that rotation there. But really interested to see if Edmonton brings him back, because I think Chris Jones is going to want to start probably 2 Americans at defensive end this year. Kwaku Boateng still hasn't been re-signed yet. You think by now you probably would have thought that he would have been given a big deal at this point in the offseason, but really interested to see what happens with that whole situation. But anyway, I really just think Antonio Simmons is just a really strong candidate to break out in the CFL, and Edmonton's going to need those kind of guys if they want to be successful next season. Now moving on to the Toronto Argonauts, and this is another team that has a lot of candidates for a list like this, but the guy I'm going with is defensive end Cordero Law, veteran of the league, been here for a while, a lot of great years at Calgary, really struggled to get healthy, I believe, in the first half of the season, if I recall correctly, but actually really turned it on in the action that I saw down the stretch. Really came up with some big plays. I think back to that Eastern final against Hamilton. I think he gets that sack of Jeremiah Mazzoli that ultimately gets Mazzoli benched, and then Dane Evans comes in and just lights the whole field on fire. But I think that Cordero Law still has lots of good football left in him. Really good pure speed rusher. A little bit of an undersized guy, but takes advantage of that quickness. And I think he could really help the Argos again in 2022. Now, last but not least, we have the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and a lot of interesting options here too, but a lot of these guys that the Tiger Cats have as pending free agents are guys that have already proven a lot at the CFL level, have earned All-Star, got the recognition for it, guys like Jamal Roll, defensive back. But one guy I think is really important for the Tiger Cats to re-sign this offseason is wide receiver Stephen Dunbar Jr., and Dunbar, this was his first season in the CFL, and I think because he signed in 2020, because CFL players, when they enter the league, American guys, they get the one year plus team option the second year. So because the contract still ran a year off in 2020, he ends up being a free agent after his first season in the CFL, really. And I think he was one of the more impactful receivers for the Tiger Cats basically the entire season. Very consistent. Not a lot of mistakes from Dunbar this season. That big perimeter receiver that the Tiger Cats really needed to win contested catches. And I think he's a worthwhile a guy to bring back, and I think he's almost a must bring back for the Tiger Cats. What I would do if I was the Tiger Cats, and it hates me to say it, but I would probably let Brandon Banks try to see what's out there on the market and bring back and focus on bringing back Dunbar and build around White, Addison, and Dunbar going forward as your like 3 core guys. If Brandon Banks doesn't find anything else out there, which he probably will, but if he still wants to come back to Hamilton, I would bring him back as well. But I think the priority should be on Dunbar at this point if you're the Tiger Cats. That's just my point there. Now, that is going to mark the end of today's list. Hope everyone enjoyed. Be sure to let me know in the comments section what is the most underrated pending free agent for your favorite CFL team going into 2022. I'd love to hear it. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.